Hi, I'm Alexander Frenzel, and I will tell you how you could stay in sync with your cookie cutter template. Before I start, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Alex. As Adam just said, I'm recently joined the content and personalization team at Wolt, and I'm a Python developer. You can get in touch with me by either sending me an email or get in touch on GitHub. My GitHub username is escaped. And if I'm not climbing, or if I'm not coding or doing open source stuff, you can mostly find me in the local bouldering or climbing gyms because that's something I really enjoy doing. But that's enough about me. Let's get to Cookie Cutter. So what is Cookie Cutter? The webpage states that Cookie Cutter is a command line utility that creates projects from cookie cutters or project templates. So that basically means that we can create, for example, a Python package project from a Python package project template. That sounded very complex. So what does that actually mean? So when you have a certain way of doing things in your project, you can create a template and use this template as a baseline to create new projects. This helps you in multiple ways. So for once, you have a standard way of doing things because you have this template at one centralized position, and it's rather easy to start a new project because what I used to do was taking an existing project, stripping out the source code, renaming the project, renaming the description, changing everything, and then started from that. But this is kind of tedious, and it's much easier to just use a template and create a new project from that. What I want to stress here is that Cookie Cutter is not only for Python. You can basically create a template for any language. It's just that Cookie Cutter happens to be written in Python. And so maybe it's just easier for us to adapt it or by the community. And we also can read the source code and make changes or pull requests by ourselves. Cookie Cutter is pretty old. I think it was published around 2013, and it has a very, very active community. If you just search for Cookie Cutter on GitHub, you find over 5,000 results. These are not all Cookie Cutter templates. There's also other related stuff, but there are enough templates to use. So let's see that in action. So how does Cookie Cutter use a template? So we simply call Cookie Cutter from the command line and point it to a Cookie Cutter template. This is most likely stored in a public repository, but you can also host it privately somewhere. And once you've done that, Cookie Cutter will ask you a bunch of questions. These questions are somewhat encoded into the template and will be used to create your project. In this case, it asks for the author, the email, the GitHub username, the project name, the project slug, and so forth. I can provide a value for each of those, but I can also fall back to the default value that you can find in the square brackets. There's one interesting thing going on here. If you have a look at the project slug, it actually derived the default value from the project name I provided before. So we will see in a second how that works. So here we are. How does that work? So on the left-hand side, we see a Cookie Cutter template. And when we run Cookie Cutter, we end up with a project that looks similar to this. Let's have a closer look. You see this part of the Cookie Cutter template is more or less copied to the project itself. So you see the .github folder, the workflows, the update.yaml, the git ignore file, and so forth. But you also see those two lines. This is a convention since Cookie Cutter passes all file names and files through a templating language, which is called Ginger. And everything that is wrapped in double curly brackets will be replaced by the value we provided to Cookie Cutter. In this case, the project slug will be rainbow_builder. I have to mention that all the variables or values we provided during the project creation are namespaced. in an object called cookiecutter. So this is just something to keep in mind, that when you want to access those variables, prefix it with cookiecutter. If we pass value, so I said all the files will be passed through Ginger. And as you can see here, this is the PyPoetry toml, which basically describes the meta information about the package I created. And all these variables get replaced with the corresponding values we provided. Ginger is very powerful. You can do if statements, for loops, and even call Python functions. If you want to know more about this, I suggest you have a look at the Ginger documentation or have a look at the cookiecutter documentation as well, because they have quite some examples. Now, the next question is, where do these questions come from, which we were asked at the beginning? So let's have a look at the root of the project template. We can find files like a README file, the license, contributors.md, and whatnot. So you can basically place whatever you need to show the audience how this project is used and what license it is in. And there's this one file called cookiecutter.json. And this file contains all the variables that we want to use to create the project. So this is the JSON file is a key value file, where the left-hand side, the key is the variable name, and the value on the right-hand side is the default value. So we can see for line 4, 5, 6, we provide the empty string as a default value. For line 7, we already provide a proper name, in this case, Python package, which most likely no one will use, but we provided it anyway. And in line 8, you can see that this value is passed to Ginger. So for each default value, we can use the Ginger templating language as well. In this case, we simply slugify the project name, so we can create the corresponding package folder structure on the file system. So let's recap. In order to use cookiecutter, we have to create a cookiecutter template. Once we've done that, we can use cookiecutter, point it to a cookiecutter template, and generate our project. Of course, you don't have to create your cookiecutter template. You can use one of those many you find on GitHub. But I suggest have a closer look, because some of them are super complex. They include stuff you might not need. And it often makes sense to maybe just use them as an inspiration to whatever you want to do. So now we have that. Now the question is, what's next? We have our cookiecutter template. We created our project. And at some point, we realize, I want to introduce some new dependencies to all of my projects. So I start to make changes to my template. And then I'm thinking about, how do I get these changes to all of my projects? One way would be to fiddle around with git-diff and patch and try to somehow generate a patch which you can apply to all the projects that have been created using your cookiecutter template. But that can become very, very tricky and hard, especially if you move files around or you refactored the pipe project toml, for example, moving sections around in that file. And then it becomes kind of hard, if not impossible to do. Another option would be to just do it manually. Go to every project you have, apply these changes you just applied to the template, and be happy. But then what if you have like 20 or 30 projects? This is kind of hard and kind of annoying. So there has to be a better way. And luckily, there's this little feller. This little feller is the mascot of cruft. And cruft is here to fight back against the boilerplate monster. Cruft is like cookiecutter, a command line utility, and it's fully compatible with cookiecutter. So you can use every cookiecutter template you already have or you want to use and just throw it at cruft, and you can generate a project in the same fashion as you did with cookiecutter. The benefit of using cruft is that it provides a way to update your projects based on the template. So whenever you make changes to the template, you can somehow use cruft to update your project as well. Cruft itself is relatively new. It was published in 2019, but it's actively developed, and I use it happily, and I think it just needs a little bit more attention. So let's have a look on how it works. As I said, it works similar to cookiecutter. The only difference is that we use a different command. The command for cruft is called cruft create, and then the name of the temp or the path to the template. And we entered with the same structure. So let's try out to update our template. For this example, we create a test folder, the corresponding dunder init.py, and we introduce PyTest as a dependency. We create a commit and push this to our template we have stored on GitHub. Great. So let's update our project. This is pretty straightforward. There are two commands cruft provides to check whether the project is up to date and to update our project. The first command is cruft check, which basically just verifies that our project is up to date. And if it's not up to date, it simply raises an error message. If it's not up to date, we can call cruft update and apply these changes that are in the template. And as you can see here, this just worked. We didn't do much. We just called cruft update. We got the new folder and we got the new dependency. So the question is, how does this work? On the left-hand side, we see the project I generated using cruft. And there's this one file which stands out. This is the .cruft.json. And this file contains all the information that we provided during project creation. It contains a reference to the template we used and a reference to the commit or to the latest commit during project creation. It also contains all the answers we provided during the questionnaire at the beginning. So Cruft is able to basically replay the project creation and then somewhat derive a diff, which then can be applied to our project. That sounds great, but what happens if we have a conflict? So in order to demonstrate that, we simply update our PyProject TOML and already introduce PyTest as a dependency in a different version. This is what I'm doing here, just modifying the file and creating the commit. The next step is to call cruft update, since we want to have all the changes that we just made to the template. And once we applied those changes, we already see, oh, there's something fishy going on. And it looks like we run into a merge conflict. This is something that we are all kind of used to. And basically, we just have to resolve this conflict and then push it to GitHub. I want to note that the commit has also changed in the cruft.json. So cruft, after we resolve the conflicts, cruft is aware what the latest version of the template is that we use to update our project. So the next time we're updating our template and we're updating our project, cruft can calculate the correct diff. So let's recap. Cruft is a tool similar to cookiecutter. So you can create a cookiecutter template or use one existing one from GitHub, create a project using cruft create. Whenever you updated your template, you can call cruft update, and if necessary, resolve the conflicts. That's great, but let's get back to the example where you have like 40 projects. You don't want to go into every project and run cruft update. It works, it's fun, and it's easier, but it's not something you want to do. So let's automate that. And I automated that in my open source projects using GitHub Actions. And you can see the corresponding flow on the right-hand side. So I will go through the files so you understand how this works. The workflow is basically a cron job, which is executed every day at midnight. And it does the following things. At the beginning, it basically does some setup, as a basic setup. So it checks out the project, installs Python, and installs the dependencies we need in order to update our template, our project. In this case, we need cruft and poetry. We need poetry because this is the dependency manager I use in my open source projects. After that, we simply call cruft update with a flag -y, which basically instructs cruft to apply the update without asking us. Once we've done that, we check whether there were changes. And if there were changes, we do some further mangling of the project. In this case, for example, when I added a new dependency to our project, I want to update my log file. So that's why I'm calling poetry log --no update. And if I added a new dependency, which I might use in my pre-commit hooks, I just install all the dependencies, run my pre-commit hook. So for example, if I would introduce black into my template, it would basically modify all the files. And in order to do that manually, I can just instruct GitHub Action to do that for me and add all those changes to the merge request we are going to create. One thing to note here is the specific action requires you to add a personal access token to GitHub and to your repository. Otherwise, it's not able to create a pull request for you. And this is how it looks on GitHub. On the left-hand side, we can see that the workflow has been executed daily. And on the right-hand side, we see one successful run of the workflow. In this case, there were no changes, but if they would have been changes, a pull request would have been created. And this would look something like this. You can inspect the changed files. And if you're happy with the results, you can simply click on merge. But if you see, oh, there are merge conflicts or the automatic update did not work well, unfortunately, you have to download your branch, fix these manually, push it back, and then you can merge it. But that's basically it. Before we get to questions, I just want to show this page. The first link is the cookie cutter template I created specifically for this presentation. The third and second link are the cookie cutter templates I personally use. They all include the auto update functionality, and the README should state enough information around how to set it up and how to make use of it. So feel free to use it as an inspiration for your own templates. Yeah, that's basically it. Any questions?
Fantastic stuff, Alex. Thank you so much for that one. I gotta say, I'm a huge fan of Cookie Cutter. I've tried to introduce it into every job I've had in this industry. And it's an amazing tool, especially when especially as a solo developer. It's really, really awesome to actually be able to just have a repository of best practices and just be able to kind of like slurp them out into a project. Right. So you had plenty of time still, another 6 minutes or so. So we have plenty of time for questions, and let's go. Question number 1 from Dolores: Can Cookie Cutter generate? Can Cookie Cutter generate templates be based off an existing project? That's a tricky one.
So the other way around.
So effectively, can you actually take an existing project and generate a template out of that one, as opposed to the vice versa?
I don't think so. I guess you can use your project as a baseline and create a cookie cutter template based on that, but I don't see a way how cookie cutter could achieve that, because there's so much knowledge that it basically don't have. So yeah, I don't think that's possible.
Yeah. Next question. So is cruft something that you can use instead of Cookie Cutter, or do you first need to use Cookie Cutter and then cruft?
You can basically use it instead of Cookie Cutter. It just happens to work with the same templating language and the same. Well, it was purposely created to get rid of the mess you have with Cookie Cutter once you've created a project based on the template. So yeah, it's basically once you start a craft, you're not using Cookie Cutter anymore. You only use craft.
Awesome. And last question, the previous one was by Kenneth. I forgot to mention their name. And this, oh no, there's more questions coming. Okay, I'm gonna have to hurry because we only have 3.5 minutes. By Oscar, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, everyone. Can craft handle Git some sub-modules in the template? That's an interesting one. I have no idea.
Yeah, me neither. I haven't tried that. So I guess you have to try it.
Yeah,
please
100%.
report back.
Yes, yeah, I'll have a quick look myself after this event, and maybe I can post something in the social gathering after the fact, because this is interesting. I have no idea whether that will work or not. And last question by Taro is, does craft support defining the Python version for the project it creates, for example, with PyEnv?
I think that's not necessarily something specific to craft. It's something related to the template, because you, for example, in the Py project Tommy, you can specify which Python version to use. So this could be a question which you could put into your cookiecutter.json file, and then during the project creation, it asks you which Python version to use, and then whenever you spin up your project, it will use the version you specified. But that totally depends on the tooling you're using. It works for poetry. I know you can also specify a .pyenv file to specify the version. I don't know if that works with pipenv as well, for example.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can say from my experience, anything you can define as a file or as text in a file can be templated away with Cookie Cutter. So, and of course, as Alex was showing before, you can ask any number of questions at the I guess the root JSON file. And you can say which version of Python do you want to use? This one, this one, this one, this one, and then you can just, I guess, address and render the template with a series of conditionals and so on and so forth. We actually have 1.5 minutes. Oh no, there's more questions.
Oh.
Does craft inherit the issue with subfolders that Cookie Cutter maintainer doesn't want to fix?
Okay, I don't know about this issue, so I would guess so, but I don't know.
That's an interesting one. I have no idea. Rasiani, if you can point us to it in the social gathering, we can chat about it at greater length, because we're not entirely sure what this one is about. That's an interesting one though as well. And 1 minute left. No more questions. Nailed it, Alex. All right. I don't want to say in regards to the whole reverse template thing, it's practically impossible, I think, because you can't know which components, which files were meant to be templated. So as Alex was saying, get a project that follows the practices you want, strip it back, replace the bits you want templated with Jinja 2 templates, and you're set. And as you will have seen, at this point, if you go over the documentation, you can have full Jinja, meaning all the loops, all the conditionals, all those stuff. So you can have very smart, very complex templates. And actually, I'm really grateful about this craft thing, because I had multiple Cookie Cutter templates failing to catch on at work before, because everyone was like, okay, so then you change the template and what? How am I going to apply this to my already rendered project? And this thing is genius. Absolutely great. Thanks for that, Alex.